Welcome to the Private School Leader Podcast, where private school leaders learn how to thrive and not just survive as they serve and lead their schools. I strongly believe that it is possible to have a long and happy and fulfilling career as a private school leader. And my passion is to help you figure out exactly how to do just that, right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And I'm your host, Mark Minkus. So I want to tell you that I think that the second most important trait of a successful private school leader is resilience. And I said the second most important trait of a successful private school leader is resilience. And if you've listened to the podcast for any length of time, you probably know what number one is, and that's integrity. Integrity always and forever will always be, in my opinion, the number one most important trait of a private school leader. But resilience, I think, is number two. And it's that important because of what we deal with and what we go through. And I'm going to talk about that in just a moment, but I find this definition fascinating. And I found a definition for the word resilience. And it says the capability of a strained body to recover its size and shape after exposure to compressive stress. So I'm going to read that again, but I want you to imagine, depending on your age, you know what a NERF football is, but you certainly know what foam rubber is, and that you have it in your hands and you squeeze it and you contort it and you squeeze it as hard as you can, and then you let go and immediately it returns to its size and shape. And so this definition for resilience says the capability of a strained body to recover its size and shape after exposure to compressive stress. And isn't that what we do as private school leaders every day, that we're exposed to compressive stress, just that stress that seems to just squeeze and twist, and then at the end of the day, do we bounce back? Do we return to our original size and shape? Do we return to our original emotional and physical state? Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. And, resilience is our ability to respond and adapt to challenges. And it's what helps us get back up again and to be stronger and to be better after meeting the hurdles in life, the disappointments, the failures, the setbacks, the mistakes, it's just more, I think it's more complex than simply bouncing back from adversity or not breaking down in the face of hardship, because resilience is a long-term state of existence. It's a state of being. And so I think that happiness comes and goes. Sometimes we're happy, sometimes we're not. But if we're joyful, if we have joy, that's something that is a state that we're in. And I believe that resilience is similar. We have it or we don't have it. And listen, you showed resilience during the COVID pandemic. And our resilience was tested like it's never been tested before when we figured out how to do school during our worldwide pandemic. But I want to tell you that I think that our resilience is being tested now more than ever before, even more than during the pandemic. And let me tell you why. Just listen to this for a minute. So as private school leaders, the things that we have on our plate, parents and their expectations, and trying to keep parents happy and respond to their sometimes unreasonable requests, finding and keeping teachers, enrollment, AI, litigation against the school, staying on budget, DEIB, the aggressive nature of politics in America and how everyone seems to be angry and yelling at everyone all the time, student discipline issues, vaping, social media, board members, high expectations from the school community, the hustle culture that's in your face all the time, the expectations of being a parent that works outside the home, and what you should be doing or with your kids, and then circling back to posting that on social media. the facilities at school, and especially if you're in an older building, school shootings, retention, teacher morale, trying to find work-life balance, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And then we, as private school leaders, are supposed to recover to our size and shape after exposure to compressive stress. We are supposed to show resilience in the face of all of that. And I think that's one of the hardest things that we have to do, but it's also one of the most important things that we need to have is resilience now more than ever before. So on today's episode of the Private School Leader Podcast, we are going to discuss the 8 keys to being a more resilient leader. But before we jump into that, I wanted to ask for a favor. So if you've ever gotten any help from this podcast, from any episode, I would ask you to share the link of this podcast with one school leader in your life that you have not yet shared the podcast with. And also, I'm asking for you to think about an aspiring leader at your school and share the link of the podcast with them. And this is how we're going to get the word out. You know, this podcast has been downloaded in 54 countries now, from Austria to Zambia and a bunch of places in between. And the way that people find this content is because people are sharing it. Some of it is through search engine optimization and, just Googling and finding things. But for the most part, and that's especially true in North America, is that the way that people find the podcast is because another leader shared it with them. And I just want them to have access to this content. And so if you would please share the podcast link with another leader or aspiring leader in your life, I would really, really appreciate it. And I'm also excited to share a resource with you that's completely free. It's a 9-page PDF called How to Use Verbal Judo to Have Better Conversations with the Parents at Your School. And verbal judo is something that George Thompson and Jerry Jenkins wrote a book about called Verbal Judo, The Gentle Art of Persuasion. And this is something that actually Dr. Thompson trained over 200,000 law enforcement officers in how to de-escalate conflict, resolve disputes, and get positive outcomes in high-pressure situations. Well, that sounds a little bit like dealing with our parents sometimes. And so what I've done is taken the important strategies from this book and put it together for you in a way that applies to your life as a private school leader, in particular when you interact with some upset parents at your school. And you can get this at theprivateschoolleader.com/judo. It's free for you just to say thanks for listening. How to use verbal judo to have better conversations with parents at your school is free for you at theprivateschoolleader.com/judo. I hope you check that out. And then last, before we jump into today's topic, just a quick reminder about Thrive Academy. If you've never taken an online course before, remember Thrive Academy is all about helping you get from where you are to where you want to be as a private school leader. And so that you can have that long and happy and fulfilling career that I always talk about. And the way it works is that it's an online course and there are 7 modules broken down into 39 lessons, and there's 9 hours of video content. And it comes with an 86-page workbook that you print out, and it's got guided notes and reflection questions and calls to action and habit tracking calendars. And we just go through these strategies that are going to change your life. One strategy at a time, one habit at a time, one lesson at a time, one page at a time. And if you want to get out of survival mode and start thriving at your school, then I encourage you to check out Thrive Academy over at theprivateschoolleader.com/thrive. All right, let's get into today's topic about resilience and how you can become a more resilient leader. And in difficult times, let's face it, our people are looking to us for courage and support and for that direction and that vision, and to align our practice with the vision. And if we practice resilient leadership, we can stay optimistic and we can help others to have that emotional strength that they need to do hard things. But isn't it hard for us to inspire others to do hard things when we're really struggling ourselves, to show that resilience and to do hard things and to bounce back? Well, we're going to really lean into this topic today. And I want to start by giving you a framework for more resilient leadership and talk about the 4 core areas of resilient leadership. And then we'll get into the list of 8 strategies and 8 keys. So the 4 areas of resilient leadership are, number 1, physical resilience, number 2, mental resilience, number 3, emotional resilience, and number 4, social resilience. And you may have not thought of resilience in a way other than just in general terms, but if you think of physical resilience, that's the body's ability to respond to stressors with strength and stamina. And if you physically we all have an autonomic nervous system that will go into fight or flight, and we'll get our heart rate racing and our blood pressure up and our palms sweating and our, all of the things that we need to get to run away from the bear, flooding the brain with cortisol, all of those things. Well, you know what? Our bodies were never meant to stay in fight or flight for a long time. It was just meant for long enough for us to get away from the bear. But we know as private school leaders that we stay in that for a long time, and there are long-term negative impacts on our physical health and our mental health. So we want to develop physical resilience. And then mental resilience is the ability to maintain or regain our cognitive capacities that are at risk and just allow the creativity to emerge. So let's face it, I mentioned cortisol a moment ago. When we are stressed out, when we're anxious, when we're dealing with the problems at school, sometimes we become impaired cognitively because of the cortisol. Sometimes we become impaired because of the decision fatigue that we experience. And so we want to have mental resilience. And then emotional resilience is just about understanding and appreciating and being self-aware and just regulating our emotions. We need to have predictable mood as a private school leader. I think that's a key for a successful private school leader, is to have that self-awareness, that emotional resilience, and that predictable mood. And that requires us to consciously choose our feelings and our responses rather than just reacting. And so is that difficult? Yeah, that's probably one of the hardest things that we do. But is it an expectation and something that's necessary for us to be effective leaders? Absolutely. We need emotional resilience. And then finally, social resilience is just our capacity to work with others, and recover from stress, and to just be able to maintain those positive social relationships. And, each of these 4 areas is going to be vital, but these areas are all interwoven and they overlap. They're certainly not mutually exclusive. And the resilient leadership itself is in the center of that. But those 4 areas, physical, mental, emotional, and social, they are all interwoven, overlapping, intersecting. But at the center, they can be strengthened and reinforced by an overall mindset of resilience. And it will raise, just like a high tide raises all the boats. That's what we're going to go for here when it comes to being a more resilient leader. And so the 8 keys to being a more resilient leader are, number 1, move your body. Number 2, get a little more sleep. Number 3, practice mindfulness. Number 4, challenge your assumptions. Number 5, savor things. Number 6, practice gratitude. Number 7, build social connections. And number 8 is to develop a growth mindset. And I just want to pause for a moment and acknowledge that some of today's content comes from a book called Resilience That Works, 8 Practices for Leadership and Life. And there are 3 authors, Marian Ruderman, Kathleen Clerkin, and Katja Fernandez. And so I will link that book in the show notes at theprivateschooleader.com/episode 82. But some of the content for today's episode came from that book. and I want to give credit where credit is due. But I also want to preface this by saying that if you're listening to this in real time, it's early May and early to mid-May, and the school year is winding down, and you might be thinking to yourself, okay, yeah, resilience, yeah. But I was very intentional about deciding when to drop this episode about resilience, because these 8 things are not easy to do, and they're a little easier to do in the summertime. And so my strategy here is to get you thinking about doing some of these things, doing them over the summer when you have a little bit of more of an opportunity to take a breath, and then you'll be in the habit of doing these things, and then they will carry into the new school year. So just wanted to kind of mention the timing, and also just to avoid you being dismissive, perhaps, about, I'm really busy. I know that May is probably the busiest time May and August are the busiest times in our school years. But this is for now, but it's also for this summer, and it's for the future. Okay. Number 1, move your body. So, I'm not going to get into talking a lot about exercise or, this kind of, cardio versus strength training or anything like that. I just think that honestly, moving your body is not equal to exercise. Because if you're not exercising, if you're not moving your body, and you know that you should, you're not going to all of a sudden be successful at, saying, okay, well, I'm going to run 3 miles, 5 mornings a week. It's just not going to happen. And so I think the place where it starts is, take the stairs instead of the elevator. Get up and move, and get out into the school and be a more visible leader, and walking around. And it's just being a little bit more active than you are. And what will happen, hopefully, happen with me, it happens with most people, is that when you start to feel a little bit better because you're moving a little more, then that leads to you moving a little bit more than that. And we know that it lowers our blood pressure and our cholesterol. We know that regular exercise improves our ability to process stress and to make us more resilient, because we can, from a physical standpoint, we can bounce back a little better when we're a little more fit, when we have a little bit more energy, when we have a little bit more physical stamina. But I also want to be realistic. And so here's the other part of that with what I said before is, walking is fantastic. It doesn't have to be, full body, P90X, body weight exercises and burpees and mountain climbers and all of that kind of stuff. The weather's getting better where you live, most likely, and it, just walk. And so moving your body a little more than you currently do. Okay. Number 2 is to get a little more sleep. And I can hear what you're saying. You're like, yeah, I know, good intentions, blah, blah, blah. All right. We're supposed to get more sleep than we do. I think it's the rare private school leader that is getting enough sleep. And so we all just can kind of wave a hand away like we're swatting a fly and just be dismissive of ever getting more sleep. Or we could turn our good intentions into reality. And I think, and this is something that you're not going to want to hear, but I think that a lot of it with our sleep has to do with the electronic leash. And you've heard me talk about the electronic leash before, and of course I'm referring to our smartphones. And our smartphones are amazing. We have almost every answer to every question in the palm of our hand. We can find places that we've never been before. We can keep ourselves safe. We can learn. We can do all kinds of amazing things with our smartphone. But we can also get easily distracted, whether it's with work or even if it's escapism and you're watching some videos or you're scrolling on Instagram, and that algorithm always is going to bring up the next thing that is of interest to you, because that's how the algorithm works, it's the attention economy. And so again, I just think that it comes down to, for me, the big game changer was to charge my phone in the next room. And for you, it could be charging your phone just out of reach from your bed. That's a place to start. Also, the place to start is to just decide, when do I want to be in bed, and then work backwards. You know what you need to do. You know what your nighttime routine is. You know when you need to kind of start shutting things down. Well, all of a sudden you look up and it's like, oh my goodness, it's such and such time. Well, again, if you start getting into the habit of getting into bed a little bit earlier, getting a little bit more sleep, all of these things, all 8 of these things, if we do a little bit of each of them, it's going to boost our resilience tremendously. But if we approach it and say, I can't do that, and I'm not going to do that, then we're going to be as resilient as we are now, and we're not going to become more resilient. So just getting a little bit more sleep. Okay, and then number 3 on our steps, our 8 steps to developing 8 keys to being a more resilient leader. Number 3 is to practice mindfulness. And so I think it's true whether you're doing well, or especially when you're not doing well, to just make some time for mindfulness and just some pausing, focusing on your breathing, whether your eyes are closed or not. I just did an episode, and I will link it in the show notes, about the physiological sigh, and also about doing some box breathing and doing a thing called Take 5. So some mindfulness practices, I'll link that in the show notes. But just to pause, to become self-aware of your environment, self-aware of your body, and it can just really slow down your heart rate. It can lower your blood pressure. It can, get that cortisol out of the brain. There are tons of different mindfulness practices. I'm not going to say, well, you should be doing this one. What I'm saying is that you should be able to press the big pause button. And even if it's just for 30 seconds or 60 seconds at different times during the day, if we do that and we make time for mindfulness, even if it's just 30 seconds, the cumulative effect of that is going to make a difference. And the only way you're going to know that that's true is to try it. All right. Okay. And then number 4 on our 8 keys to being a more resilient leader is to challenge your assumptions. So this one's a little different. I think the first 3 were pretty much what you expected, but challenge your faulty assumptions about what others are thinking and doing. And that's actually a process called cognitive reappraisal. And our perceptions are more likely to become distorted or irrational when we are under stress. And that makes sense, right? And so in many cases, we oversimplify a situation, and that may not be accurate. And so I think that if we can challenge the assumptions, we can arrive at more productive and less stressful beliefs. And so what I'm getting at, I know that might be a little complex, a little hard to understand, and maybe I'm not doing a good job explaining it. But with the cognitive reappraisal is to just kind of like pause and try to look at the situation as an interested bystander. So you're in that situation. You're in that conversation with that parent, or that making that decision about that student discipline issue, or having that difficult conversation with a teacher, and you're in it. But you can have, if you take the opportunity to try to look at that situation as an interested bystander, it is amazing what that does for you from the standpoint of how it impacts your level of stress, physical stress, emotional stress, the physical and emotional reactions that are happening in your body. And so it's just a way to, again, press pause and to challenge your assumptions and to try to observe it as a bystander, and you can arrive at some less stressful beliefs about that situation. For instance, maybe you won't perceive yourself to be an imposter and to just be testing positive for imposter syndrome if when you mess up or when something doesn't go the right way, if you pause and do some cognitive reappraisal and try to look at the situation as an interested bystander, maybe the facts of the situation are that you do know what you're doing and you're not an imposter. So that's an example that I hope makes it a little more clear. All right, so we're talking about the 8 keys to being a more resilient leader. Number 1, move your body a little more. Number 2, get a little more sleep. Number 3, practice mindfulness. Number 4, challenge your assumptions. And number 5 is to savor things. I love the word savor, and I want to read you a definition that I found. And it says, quote, savor involves relishing and lingering over the enjoyment of something, whether it's food, an experience, a moment, or an accomplishment. Savoring often involves being fully present and mindful, allowing oneself to fully engage with and appreciate the sensations and emotions associated with the object or experience being savored. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what it means to savor. When you're at I see this all the time. When I go to, and it's not all that often, but if I go to like a college football game or an NFL game, I keep my phone in my pocket. You'll see a lot of people that are at live events and they have their phone out the whole time and they're taking video, and I guess they're going to post it online later, but they're not like present in the moment, and they're not like savoring the moment or even fully like allowing oneself to fully engage, is what the definition said, with that moment, because they're too busy like recording the moment for the ability to post it, I guess. And so that's one example. Another example is with being outside. Okay. So let's say you go outside for recess, or you're outside doing some yard work, or, you're outside playing with your kids. It's like, do we allow ourselves to engage with like, and appreciate and enjoy and savor the beauty of nature, the beauty of a tree or a sunset or an animal that we see? And, I can hear what you're saying. It's like, you know what? I am so busy. I don't have time to eat. I don't have time to go to the bathroom. I certainly don't have time to savor and look at a tree. But I hope that you can savor some things in your life. And whether those be relationships, whether it be a delicious meal, whether it be nature, whether it be an event that you're going to, whatever it is, savoring things has been proven to build resilience. And one of the reasons is because our brains have a negativity bias. And so when we consciously savor the good things in life, it helps to combat the natural negativity bias that we have. And let's face it, a lot of the stuff that we do all day long as private school leaders is all about solving problems, putting out fires, the tyranny of the urgent, and we like live kind of in that negative zone. And one of the ways that we can get a little bit out of that zone is to celebrate the positives and savor them. And when you're at an event for school and a kid gets up and, sings a song or recites a poem, or, you're at a game and you see the student athletes doing their thing, it's like to just in that moment, appreciate it and engage and savor it. And whatever it is that you enjoy doing, whether it's walking your dog or spending time with your spouse or partner, or, gardening or cooking or baking or painting or golfing or whatever it is, to just enjoy it, be in the moment. And I think that's really, really hard for us because of how we live our lives at breakneck speed as private school leaders. All right. That takes us to number 6 on our list, which is practice gratitude. And I've talked about this before. Actually did episode 13, was all about how to use gratitude to be happier and more fulfilled and to be a better leader. And so I will link episode 13 in the show notes at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 82. But giving thanks for things, being appreciative of things, being grateful for things will make you a better leader, and it will make you a more resilient leader. Because when you take time to acknowledge and appreciate the small things throughout your day, you will have a more balanced approach when the bad things happen, because it's not all negative. And remember I said about negativity bias? Well, we also, when you combine how busy we are with a negativity bias, we just fly past things for which we should be grateful. And so that's why I'm a big proponent of having a gratitude practice. And I talk more about that in episode 13, but to just have some practice, whether it's on your drive to work or your drive home one day. I do mine on Mondays on my drive to work. It's about 30 minutes. Some people write down 3 things at the end of the day that they're thankful for that happened that day, but gratitude is huge when it comes to building resilience. And then 2 more as we wrap up our list. Number 7 is to build social connections. You know, as private school leaders, we're really busy, but we're also isolated. I did a recent episode called How to Overcome Isolation in a Fishbowl. You know, no one knows what it's like to be a leader at a private school except other leaders at private schools. And it's lonely and it's isolated, and sometimes we can't build those social connections. And so we need to really lean into those relationships in our life, whether it's a couple of relationships at work with colleagues, but certainly with relationships with friends and family and loved ones outside of work, to just have it meet those social and emotional needs that we have. And we sometimes use up all of our words at school because we're so busy all day doing that, solving problems, putting out fires. But if we want to be more resilient, we need to remember that really strong social connections matter for building our resilient leadership and also modeling that for our team, for our teachers and our staff. And then number 8 is to develop a growth mindset. And the number one key to building resilience is to have a growth mindset. Carol Dweck at Stanford University did over 30 years of research on this, wrote the book Mindset. And, you know, a fixed mindset is we believe we get all of our talent, ability in a certain area at birth. But a growth mindset is belief that our ability and skills can change with effort and stamina and sticking with a problem and working hard and trying new strategies. And I believe that most private school leaders have a growth mindset in general, but I think that we have a fixed mindset about certain things. And some of those might be about work-life balance. We just have a fixed mindset. A work-life balance is impossible, okay? Maybe it's about the parents at our school. We have a fixed mindset, or about finance or about the board, and we just say, well, it is what it is. I don't want to get into all of that, but I do want to say that having a growth mindset is the key to building resilience. And I will link episode 4 of this podcast in the show notes. And it's all about how to develop a growth mindset, and that will help you be more resilient as a leader. And so speaking of that, let's just hit our big takeaways from today's episode. The 8 keys to being a more resilient leader. Number 1, move your body. Number 2, get a little more sleep. Number 3, practice mindfulness. Number 4, challenge your assumptions. Number 5, savor things. Number 6, practice gratitude. Number 7, build social connections. And number 8, develop a growth mindset. And then a reminder that if you're listening to this in real time, mid-May, as the school year is winding down, that summer is a great time to start building some of these habits so that they will carry into the new school year in the fall, and you will be a more resilient leader in the coming school year. And your call to action is to pick 2 of these strategies, 2 of these steps, to work on them for 2 weeks, and then send me an email at mark.o.minkus@gmail.com and let me know how it's going. Pick 2, do them for 2 weeks, send me an email. All right, so let's wrap it up. Just a quick reminder about a new guide for you called How to Use Verbal Judo to Have Better Conversations with the Parents at Your School. And you can grab that at theprivateschoolleader.com/judo. And those are strategies taken from the book Verbal Judo and the Art of Persuasion, applying them specifically to you as a private school leader and your interaction with parents. And hopefully you'll get some really helpful strategies from that at theprivateschoolleader.com/judo. And then another reminder about Thrive Academy, that can help you get out of the survival mode and feeling the way that you're feeling. And you can check that out at theprivateschoolleader.com/thrive. Already mentioned my email address, mark.o.minkus@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. And the show notes are at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 82. And you can find me on Instagram at theprivateschoolleader, on Twitter at the PS Leader. As I said at the top of the episode, please share the link to this podcast with a leader in your life, a school leader, and with an aspiring leader at your school. And I've been your host, Mark Minkus, and I want to say that I just really appreciate you and all of your amazing hard work and dedication that you pour into those lucky kids and teachers at your school. And so thank you so much for taking some of that precious time out of your week to join me here today. And I'll see you next time right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And until then, always remember to serve first, lead second, and make a difference.